Welcome to the Four Corners 912 project discussion on rules of the game. For a country to exist peaceably as a unified people in the game of life, we all must be playing by the same rule. The rules for our country were established in the Constitution that was agreed upon to abide by. This was and is the supreme law of the land.
To follow the rules, you must know what they are. They are few and clear. We hope to help you all to better understand what the rules are, as we are looking to elect new representatives in local and state government offices next year.
They take an oath to uphold the constitutions of both the state and the United States.
What are they to uphold and protect?
We will begin this regular discussion beginning with the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments of the Constitution.
Good morning. Welcome to the Rules of the Game from the Four Corners 912. Today, we're going to be talking about the city code and how it applies with our Constitution. We have Dave Waters with us as a special guest to help us to understand a little bit about the code and what the issues there are. Start off with, I want to be sure and recognize our sponsors and appreciate them being able to put it on for us. Don Brunson from Woodman Life. If you need insurance, it's the place to go. And if you need a new antenna, so you can get that free antenna TV, go to White Eagle, the antenna guy. Now, to start off with, I want to mention we're concerned about how the codes and our Constitution all blend together. One thing we have to, I think, remember is we start off with what are God-given rights. And in our independence, we talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness originally was property, life, liberty, and property. And if we have our property and the control of it, we're happy. But we need some measure of government to help us stay in line and keep from kicking each other and killing each other. Our power that we're given by our Creator, God Himself, He gives us those rights, and they are derived from the people, the consent of the governed. So when we look at our government, beginning at the city level, county, the state, they operate under the consent of the people. Now, as we look at that, remember that, we look into how codes were established. Why do we get these things? I think, Bud, you have a little bit of history. This isn't new. It started a long time ago.
If we look at the broad spectrum of land use codes, we can go back even beyond ancient Egypt. There were some things you did inside the camp, and there were some things you did outside the camp. So that's a form of a land use code. And it pretty well stayed, for health and safety reasons, on through the centuries, until we get to the late 1800s and the early 1900s here in the United States. We turned it on its head, and the modern institution of what we now look at it in these building codes was racist and discriminatory. You had the elite and the upper crust not wanting the riffraff to be next door. I can afford 100 acres and a mansion. You can afford 3 acres and a bungalow. Well, I don't want you next door to me. So, we'll get together and we'll have a building code that excludes you from using your talent, your money, and your time to do what you can afford any place that you like. No, you can't do that any place you like. because I get to say you can't. And that's where we're at today with these modern building codes.
Correct.
Doesn't that interfere with the idea of liberty, that I can live on my property and do what I want, the way I want?
Mm-hmm.
I have that right, don't I?
It totally excludes your free exercise. Free exercise means I can do with my talent and my resources whatever I please within the confines that I'm not hurting my neighbor. I'm not hurting anybody. How does a 3-acre plot with a bungalow harm the guy with the 100 acres? It doesn't. It doesn't bother him at all. Look out a different window if you don't like it. Right.
This is our liberty, is I have the liberty to have the kind of house I want, do what I want with it, as long as it doesn't infringe on my neighbor's liberty to have the house he wants and live the way he wants.
But under these codes, you're not allowed to do that.
Okay. Well, Dave, you've been looking at the codes. What is the concerns? What are we concerned about? Don't we have a code already? Why do we have a new one?
We do have a current code. And from looking through the new code, there are things in the current code that we don't like in the new code. So if we don't accept this code, we still need to go back and take some of these things out of our old codes. Some of the things are a single family residence will be required to have a 412 pitch roof, which really infringes on the lower income people's rights, because most mobile homes do not have that. So that will run up the cost of your lower income housing. The city of Cortez is very famous for saying, we need low income housing. We need housing for these people that don't make a lot of money around here. But when they enact codes like this, it does the exact opposite thing.
Right. My understanding is Montezuma County, right with the state, we have already one of the higher, I'd say, cost of living, and particularly cost of housing. Our housing costs are high. We have, well, my own granddaughter, she wanted to come down here and work, but she said, I can't afford to, because my rental costs, my housing costs are too high.
Correct.
This code, as I understand it, is going to raise the cost of housing even more than it already is.
Absolutely. And, you know, they're regulating everything they can in this code. For single family housing, they're requiring a extra 5 foot of setback, which doesn't sound like much. But when you add the 5 foot of setback, and now you are going to have 2 off-street parking spots, and your garage does not count for one of those, then your driveway is going to have to be twice as wide as what we're normally used to pouring. They have to be concrete driveways, by the way. So the cost of your driveway is going to double. You also have 5 more feet of every utility that goes to that house: water, gas, sewer. It all adds up. So just small things like that, the lack of being able to use vinyl siding. Vinyl siding is a very cheap, inexpensive, I would say, siding to use. And a lot of people like it because they don't like to paint.
And you wash it down.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways this code, in my opinion, will affect every asset of life in Cortez, from being a single family or a single homeowner to a business owner. Business owners, you better not touch your buildings, because as soon as you touch your buildings, you're going to be stuccoing them and putting a decorative
And it's in
facade.
the code that if you have a material change,
Right.
then you must bring everything up to code.
Or a change of use, even.
Well, and that's where it was going. Some jurisdictions have ruled that a sale, I sell you my house, is a material change, And so one of us would have to bring that house up to code.
Well, and that's a very good point that I just learned about at the meeting with the realtors and the city planner. They had a totally different perspective on that. What they were talking to the city about was, once they pass this code, then if you own say you own a house in Paradise Village that only has a 312 pitch roof, it immediately becomes a non-compliant
Right.
house. When you go to sell that, this is what they were telling the city. I don't know this for a fact, but it makes perfect sense. Lenders look at that and they say, it's a non-conforming house.
Mm-hmm.
We're very reluctant to finance that.
Yep.
So that's not only bad for the seller, it's bad for the buyer.
And the other alternative is you have to go back to P&Z to apply for an exemption,
Right.
right? Which then you have to go through that other whole process to get a variance, not an exemption, but a variance.
Right.
So that even though the code specifies something, that they will determine, the city council will make the final decision that, okay, we will allow this nonconformance.
Yes, and I'm not sure that's completely correct. You have to go back through P&Z, but I think that the way this is set up, P&Z makes the final
And
the final decision.
I've not
And-
read that portion of it. The county has to, if you get a
right, it has
variance,
to go all the way back through.
then you have to go to the commissioners. I was thinking it probably similar to that.
That's my take on it from
Okay.
what I've been hearing, and that would shorten up the process. And that's one of the things that they say that they want to do, is shorten up the process and make it more black and white.
How about this then, to shorten up the process? Delete all of this. Get it out of the way. That really shortened the process.
Yeah.
I go to the bank, I get the money, I build my house.
Right.
Well, to me, it brings up the question, we talk about all these codes, the codes, whether it's a 412 pitch roof or the siding on your house or whatever, whether it's in the old code or the new code. How many codes do we need? What codes is actually for governance to keep us off each other's back and to live in a society together? What codes is, I think, adequate or necessary?
We can point to, I've not followed the city, but I do follow the county. And you look, every single Tuesday afternoon is spent on land use code issues. Now, some are fine. You know, you have the high impact permits for Kinder Morgan. The state rules most of that.
Correct.
The county just goes through a little minor process.
Yeah, the
but-
county has a very simple land
Yeah,
use
very
code,
simple.
and it seems
Um,
to work, by the way.
No, it doesn't.
Some much better than this.
If you have an issue, like I said, the county commissioners spend every Tuesday afternoon on land use code variances, violations, permitting, whatever. That tells you that the process does not work, because you have to have your governing body constantly involved in tweaking it.
Right.
Now, not counting the special use permits, that's a different issue, but just I've seen it time after time after time. It devolves into one neighbor looking at the land use code as a weapon against another
Right.
neighbor.
And
And
the-
that's what it is, and they spend every Tuesday afternoon dealing with it.
And the more weapons you have to use, the more you're going to have to deal with it. And,
That's right.
And a very high percentage of these new codes that they want to adopt concern aesthetics. They're
Yes.
not health, safety, or welfare of the people. It's aesthetics.
If they were interested in health, safety, and I don't like the word welfare in that phrase, it's there,
Right.
but we so misunderstand what that means that I don't even use it anymore.
Once again, it can be misconstrued or whatever. you
Health
want.
and safety. So the city code, the county code can cite by reference the Colorado Department of Health rules on plumbing inspections and electrical inspections. You're done.
Right.
You're done.
That's all the code you need.
That's all the code you need. Everything else is subjective aesthetics. Everything
Right.
else.
And that's what this was originally brought forth for, is aesthetics. It was, they wanted to adopt this to help Cortez look better. They want to improve the looks of Cortez.
By whose measure?
Exactly. And it's much, in my opinion, as a business owner, I'll want to comply with it a lot better if it's an incentive instead of a rule that's getting shoved down my throat.
That's a good point.
You know, why can't we do some incentives for that kind of thing? That would be much better, and I think you'd get a lot better result out of it.
And I think if we go back to where Dexter started with the liberty thing, which is what we're about, the Declaration of Independence uses life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay. The Declaration of Independence is a theory. The Constitution puts that theory into practice. The Constitution uses the phrase life, liberty, and property. Fourth and 14th Amendments, I think. So let's deal with the property. If I don't control my property, then I don't own it.
Exactly.
If I've got a bureaucrat over here and a bureaucrat over there and a law here and a rule here to restrict my free use of my property, it's not mine.
Right. And it applies to businesses too.
It applies to business.
So when you've got a bureaucracy running your business basically, or telling you how you can run your business, which is in this code too, certain businesses can only keep certain hours and they can only be in certain places, and it goes all, this is my favorite one, I guess, because this shows how petty it is. It goes all the way down to, if you want to babysit one child in your home, they're regulating you.
Yes.
You have to get a state permit, and then you have to show it to the city, which kicks in the whole code. Then you have to provide one off-street parking spot per 3 children up to 6 children.
And the way I read that, Dave, it didn't matter if you had a dozen off-street parking spaces already. The phraseology in that chapter says you must add an additional space.
Right.
Now, how dumb can you get?
So that's the way I took it. So the parking spaces that you have for your house, which probably aren't enough anyway to begin with, on top of, they don't count. So on top of that, in order to babysit one child, according to this code, if they want to apply it, you have to build one off-street parking spot, which is a concrete or asphalt parking spot. And then if you hit 7 children, then you have to put up what they refer to as a buffer yard, which is a certain width of trees, bushes, and shrubs all the way around your home.
And fencing, is fencing included in
It can be, including, on some business, fencing is included. I don't think on the, until you get into a bigger daycare, it's not.
I like the part about the neighboring houses, that you have to have a buffer between your house and their house, such that you cannot peer into your neighbor's yard
Side yard.
or window.
Yeah.
So if I have a single-story house and you have a 2-story house, one of my options is to build a fence high enough
Right.
to block your 2nd-story window.
Yeah.
This is nuts.
One of the other things, getting back to the babysitting, once you got your parking spots and all that approved, then they regulate your hours.
Right.
I believe it's from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. or,
I think that's right.
yeah. So, and we happen to own storage units. And so they regulate our hours in certain spots too. They will be able to regulate our hours in certain spots for a storage unit. And now you can't build certain businesses in certain places.
Right.
And storage units are one of those businesses that they don't want to see.
Don't want to see it.
Right.
You know, our whole county, well, much of whole western U.S. was built on the concept of owning our own property, being able to think for myself, being responsible for myself, succeeding on my own, and diversity of people, diversity of ideas is what built Cortez and Montezuma County. My great-grandfather, my grandfather homesteaded up here, was one of those that he came here because he could own his own property, do his own thing, fail or succeed on his own, without the neighbors pointing his finger and having him hauled into jail.
Helping him fail.
The idea was, that's a good point, because the neighbors at that time helped each other succeed.
Right.
It wasn't preventing you from succeeding, it was helping you to succeed. And when we start getting into codes, the saying, well, you need to do it this way, I'm not helping you because you have to do it this way. Give you an idea of, I painted my house purple and it really helped a lot, you know. Well, no, you have to paint it green because I think it's better.
Right.
Whatever, you know. The
It
idea is
matches
we
the
should help
neighborhood.
each other with our diversity of ideas to build my house a different shape than yours, or whatever, you know. Wow, that's cool. That's a neat idea. That's the reason why we're so diverse as we are. We started with diversity, and now we want to say, no, let's all march in lockstep with each other, and we all got to look alike. We have to be alike,
So,
think alike, and we're not alike.
so what started out as diversity is now going to be called non-compliance.
Yeah.
That's right.
You got Montezuma Avenue, the historic district of Montezuma Avenue. They use terms like eclectic, okay, and so forth and so on. That's about as diverse architecturally as you can get.
Right.
They don't want that
No.
anywhere else, and yet they laud the eclectic view of Montezuma Avenue.
Right.
You know, they're all over the place on this stuff.
And getting back to the neighbors helping each other and stuff, really isn't that what our city council is there for? Our government is supposed to be there for, is to help us succeed. When the businesses and the people of Cortez succeed, the city succeeds.
That's right.
And the same thing, what a lot of people I don't think they realize is if Cortez does poorly, the county does poorly,
That's right.
or vice versa. So my other big concern is they are putting wording into this. It's called extraterritorial. That concerns me greatly because we have property and businesses outside the city limits too. And my opinion is if they don't want to start applying their rules into the county, why is that language even in this?
That section cites 4 or 5 different state laws.
At least. I think they've added to it.
I read it. I read those laws. And a lot of what's in that section is cut and paste from state law. So that's the way it is. But when you read the entire context, here's what I came up with. It says that in the new code, the city will regulate business
Right.
in that 3-mile zone. Okay. And it will deal with the alignment of streets and utilities and yada, on and on and on. But there's a phrase in one of the laws that says this is predicated on a proposed annexation. Now, that phrase is not repeated throughout these other laws, but it kind of gave me the notion that that's what it's based on, so that if there is a proposed annexation and Mr. Dave Waters owns property within that area, then if Mr. Dave Waters wants to build whatever, it should comply with the city code because it will be part of the city upon annexation. Now, like I said, that is my general takeaway from all of the laws that I read. I read a couple of laws that they did not cite. The law that they cite, that 31-501.
15501, 3115-501.
Yeah.
I've got it memorized.
The way they put it in this new city code is wrong. That law does not say what the new code says that it says.
Yeah.
It doesn't say it.
So but that brings me back to my concern. Once this is passed, then we don't have the group together with us when they decide that Mr. Dave Waters needs to do this. It's Mr. Dave Waters
All alone.
against the city of Cortez. And
But see, this is one of the tricks that all legislatures pull. We'll cite this code, we'll cite the state law with which we are complying. Nobody reads the state law to see if they're actually telling the truth about it.
it
And
can
they're
be,
not.
It can be interpreted to the point where it goes to court.
A couple of things. We're going to have to wrap this up real quick here.
Are you overtime again?
Yeah, you are.
Thanks, sir.
But a couple of things. One is that area is very confusing and a lot of questions about it. And some lawyers have looked at it and says, well, it uses the words may, the county may in that zone area. County may, not shall. So it's up, some of them say the county, you have to deal with them. And
Right.
they're kind of protecting you in that sense. So that it's not the city can't act unilaterally is what they're saying and just take you in.
Right.
So that's not an automatic happening. But that raises the question of, in the future, we have people, faces are going to change on
Absolutely.
the county commission. Faces are going to change on the city council.
Soon.
And
It was fine.
they change periodically.
4 or 5
And
up for
so
re-election.
the new codes can be proposed and changes can be made in laws. The key that when you have to look at is our codes should be listed, health and safety, period.
Mm-hmm.
When you open it up to allowing other lower level bureaucrats any control, they're unelected. You have no control over them. We have to look at our elected officials maintaining the concept of our Constitution as we as residents, landowners with our private land ownership, protecting our officers at both the city and county and state level should be protecting our rights of private ownership and our safety issues that we're concerned with, and limit all codes to that and let our liberty, let you live your life and build your house the way you want, as long as it doesn't infringe on your neighbors. And trying to control us is, we got to get away from that. So as we look at, we have an election coming up recently, I mean, it's coming up this year. We're going to have 2 new county
April and
commissioners.
November.
They need to know what is our Constitution, our rights, what is their responsibility of protecting those for all county residents, and the city is in the county.
Yes.
They need to be as concerned, but the city has its own authority beyond. And so our city people need to understand their responsibility of protecting your city residents. their rights of private ownership and liberty to live your life in the city and to help you succeed as a resident, not control you and rule over you. And same thing with the county. The county shouldn't be ruling over us, but helping us to get along with each other and not infringing on each other's rights and building the county and the city together.
Absolutely, and they can't build separately.
That's
We're tied at the hip, and we need to work together and be successful.
So
Good
can
point.
can we close that out as
Well,
as saying we need to do away with this whole idea of a new code and probably reducing the other bit, and as you say,
Absolutely.
what can we do to start over, maybe start over again, you might say, or take a new look at working together.
Absolutely. If we are successful in defeating this code, instead of taking things out of this new code, we need to be looking at taking some of the bad things that we've discovered in our old code out that have never been addressed in the past.
yeah.
I'd like
And
to s-
there's lots of it.
I'd like to see the city and the county come together and say, let's take a whole new look at the county as a whole, including the city and
I think one
and
of the
town.
things we
Right.
see in the attitude is that the city has come to consider itself a separate little fiefdom.
Yes.
You know, this is my territory, and I'm not going to give up
Yeah.
any of it. I'm not going to give up any authority over it. It's my territory. If I'm a city council person, this is my territory. But okay, we've mentioned, I don't know how many times, when we're discussing the 10th Amendment, the Bill of Rights, don't take our word for it.
Absolutely.
Get you a constitution,
Yeah.
read it, read the history, the Federalist Papers, the anti-Federalist Papers, they're all available. We've mentioned that in the context of the Bill of Rights. Go on your search engine, type in City of Cortez, click on it, and both codes are right there on that front page. You can download it, you can read it chapter one little column over here gives it chapter by chapter, so you have to click on chapter 1 and chapter 2. So you have to learn to manipulate the Cortez homepage. But it's there. Go read it. Read the part that affects you. If you own a business, there are certain sections that apply there. If you are residential, and this I remember because I read it, starts on page 88, I think, and deals with a lot of residential issues.
I
But
believe
it's there.
Section 3.
Compare them and look at the two
Look
and
at-
say what is consistent with my liberty and rights.
Bingo.
And what is
Always from that perspective in the back of your mind.
Or if you're like me and need a little bit of shortcut because you don't have enough time, I believe the Montezuma County Women's Republicans have a highlighted version, a 50-page version that we did with our concerns
Yeah.
on it. You could take a look at that.
Very good. Let's call her quits, and
All right.
we'll see you next time. Thank you very much, Dave, for being with us and explaining everything.
Thank you for
Thank
giving
you,
us
Dave.
the opportunity.